Silvia, really appreciate you taking the opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. Would love to dive into the case component if you're ready for that.
Yes, I'm ready.
Awesome. Okay, so here's a little bit about our situation today. Our client is a private equity firm who's considering taking private a leading manufacturer of bicycle helmets. So they've come to us and request our guidance on whether or not they should take it private.
Okay, great. So let me just make sure I understand the case. Essentially, our client is a leading PE firm, and they're requesting our help to figure out whether to take a private manufacturer of bicycle helmets public. Is there any particular objective we should be mindful as we think about this question?
There's no specific additional objectives that we know about at this time.
Okay. And if you don't mind, I just love to ask you a couple of clarifying questions just to figure out a little bit more about the situation. So do we know where this private manufacturer bicycle helmet company is based geographically?
Right now, we don't actually have a lot of information about that, no.
Okay. And in terms of a timeline of when they want to take it private, is it more of a short term or long term, or do they want to figure that out as soon as possible?
Yeah, we don't know anything about their goals or their time horizon in that sense either.
Okay. So maybe let me just take a couple minutes to jot down a few ideas, and then I can share them with you if that's okay.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay. I can share some ideas just in general as to how we can think about this. So overall, I have bucketed them into three main buckets. And essentially, the first one will be around profitability or financials. The second one would be around markets. And then I had one for other considerations or risks that we should take into account. And so in terms of profitability, I'd be interested to look at, will this deal be actually profitable? So will we be able to make revenues? How much will be the costs for going into this private, like taking this company public? And also, what will be the sources of financing? Whether that's going to come from internally or issuing debt or having to raise debt in the public. From a market perspective, I'd be very interested in understanding what's the competition like for bicycle helmet manufacturers? What is the market size of just bicycle helmet manufacturers in general? And what piece of the market does the company currently hold? And also basically understanding the industry as a whole, like is there growth in the bicycle helmet market, and what are the things we should take into account? And then in terms of other considerations or risks, understanding essentially like how is technology influencing the bicycle manufacturer market would be interesting. Also understanding whether the company, produces this themselves or do they source, like what's their supply chain look like? And what are some legal risks or implications into taking this company public in terms of, where it's currently based and where it currently is thinking about expansion? I think, sorry, one more that I'm thinking about on this. We also would be helpful to understand at least what is the cycling industry look like as well, because helmets seem to be dependent on bicycles. So there could be a link there that's interesting. And also be in terms of security, because helmets protect, the rider, understanding, what is like the security of riding outside looking like or in the future. So, out of these three things, I think it'd be helpful. My hunch is that we should probably just look into the current market for bicycle helmets and what's the market size that this company currently holds, to get a sense as to where it stands in terms of its competition, if you have some information about that.
Okay. Now that makes sense. So in terms of the overall size of the market, we don't have any data on that. But what else would you want to look at?
I think maybe looking at its competition would be helpful to see, who are the top competitors for this bicycle helmet company.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. This target company is called HardHead, and they are the leader in this space. They've got 60% market share.
Okay, that's great to know. All right. And do we know in general, do we have any information on its financials? So if we were to do this deal, how much will taking this company public would cost?
We do have some information about the company's financials, so to speak, that they're in a pretty good cost position. Their costs are low. They manufacture in Asia, and so it really helps them keep pretty good margins, although we don't have any specific profitability data.
Okay. And what are the overall kind of like goals of the company, like in the next 5 or 10 years in terms of its growth? Like, are they looking to duplicate its growth or, kind of like increase their ROI? Do we have any sense of where they're trying to go?
Well, there actually have been some dynamic shifts in the market, which have led to some recent growth. They don't expect to be able to maintain that growth, but no, they're not hugely well structured and organized. We don't know of any other specific targets or metrics that they have around growth moving forward.
Okay. All right. And in terms of how we could finance this deal, basically, do we have any sense as to, do they have enough internal financing to go public, or the interest of shareholders in taking the company public? Well, maybe there's no shareholders yet because it's not public, but the interest of the partners or the owners in taking it public.
Yeah, no. So just to clarify,
Yeah.
we're talking about whether or not a PE firm should take this company private.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, that's okay. Yeah.
Okay.
So we though don't have a lot of insight at this point in time about what those current internal preferences would be.
Okay. All right. What other information do you have available that might be helpful for us to look at?
Yeah, well, what are some of the other things that you're interested to know?
Well, if we want to take a company private, we may think about, I talked about profitability, market, and the competition and other considerations. So, we went through whether the company would make additional revenue, the costs of it. Do we have any information on what it would take to take the company private, like how much it would cost?
No, we don't have any cost information or data in that sense.
Okay. And then let me try to think what else. Just maybe give me a couple minutes to think about other ideas.
Okay.
All right. Maybe, so I thought about three additional things we could look at. Maybe if we have information on the management of the firm and how they would react in terms of taking the company private, like who is going to continue being in the management, that would be helpful. Also understanding, what's the shareholder view in taking the company private, and maybe getting a little bit more information on the price of their current helmets that they provide to see if they're par with competition.
Well, we don't have a lot of insight right now into the management or the internal operations of the company. What was your second bucket?
Shareholders. Do we know whether the shareholders would?
We don't have a lot of insight
this?
into the shareholder perspective or support. What was your third bucket?
About the price of the product. So do we know for how much do they produce the helmets right now, and is their price competitive?
So we don't have a lot of information about specific pricing, although I can tell you a little bit about the channels. I think that has a similar dynamic here.
Okay.
So historically, HardHead has sold primarily through the small specialty shops, mom and pop bike retailers. But their channel mix has somewhat recently moved to 50% discounters. Think large stores like Walmart. And it looks like the discounters will continue to dominate in the future. So I am actually interested in how you think this change in distribution channel would affect the company's future prospects.
Okay, that's interesting. So if they used to have small specialty shops, probably they had lots of good relationships with all of these suppliers. And now if they're going to go through and they probably could get a larger profit margin because they could negotiate those deals. But now if they're going to go through the 50% discount stores, they might have to start kind of like beginning those relationships again with these new channels and figure out how they could, maybe this could help in the logistics of transporting the product, but also in terms of margins, maybe it could lower their margins because they may want to take a higher stake, given they may be able to increase the sales of the product because of more people actually go to buy at discount stores rather than at mom and pop shops.
Those are some good thoughts. Yeah, what else can you think of?
Another, thing to have in mind is that we may capture an additional client base that we didn't have access to before. And so with small and pop, like mom and pop shops, maybe we were just going to those markets that were very specific in particular to, buy people who really enjoy cycling. But now with this other channels in discount stores, we may actually capture a larger portion of customers who may enter the store to buy something else and then decide to get the helmet just because of adjacency to other products. Okay. So, so far we know that they're a leader in the bicycle market. They have 60% of market share. We also know that their distribution channels are now going to be shifting to 50% discount stores. And still the goal is for us to figure out whether or not to take the company private, since the company is now public. So do we have any information on the performance of the share of this company over some period of time?
Good question. So we know that they have been growing. Revenues have been increasing. They have been on an upward trajectory with their market share. But there are some new entrants into the space. They're small, but they're growing quickly, including players like Nike and Reebok.
Okay. And do we have any information as to how much market share Nike and Reebok have been able to capture in this period of time?
No, all other existing competitors have a pretty small share, including Nike and Reebok, but we do expect them to continue to grow fairly dramatically.
All right. Okay. Let me try to keep thinking about, what else we could consider here. If you just give me an additional moment.
Yeah, I think there's still some good things in your structure we haven't covered yet.
Oh yeah, like which one?
Look through your structure and tell me what you think we haven't covered yet.
So so my structure included profitability, market share, and then other considerations. And so in terms of profitability, we talked about, will they be making additional revenues? Do we have information on revenues?
Good question. We don't have any revenue data right now.
Okay. We talked about how much will the deal cost? And I think we already figured out you don't have information on cost. And then how will the deal be financed, whether internally or externally? So I don't know if we have information on that.
No information on that.
All right. So in terms of the market, we talked about competition and we said that they're a leader. They have 60% of market share. So we have the market size. We have ideas in terms of the industry growth that we talked about. So ideas are, the fact that these other two competitions like Nike and Reebok are coming into the space. And in terms of channels, we also know they're not going to small specialty shops, but now going to discount stores. And then in terms of other considerations, we talked about legal risks. I don't know if there's information around that. We talked about technology and how technology could be influencing this market. Maybe is there information around that?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this category, when we talk about legal risks, and you mentioned kind of a security aspect,
Yes.
It's important to know and mention that in the last 5 years, most states have passed helmet laws. So with that new piece of data and information, what do you take from that? What impact do you think that has?
And sorry, could I ask you more about that? So helmet laws as to mandating people to wear helmets
Correct. On a bicycle, mandating helmet usage.
Okay. And is it only on bicycles or any like motor vehicle?
This client focuses primarily on bicycle helmets.
No, I was just asking about the state law.
Oh, well, the majority of states have passed bicycle helmet laws. I don't have any information about motorcycle helmet laws.
Got it. Well, then this means that the market is definitely going to grow if the states have passed these mandatory helmet laws, because we're going to probably expect a lot of people to be buying helmets in order to continue using their bicycles, or we may see a shift in them using other transportation methods because of the lack of the helmets.
Okay. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
So
yeah.
do we have any information on consumer data or behavior as to whether they would prefer riding bicycles or other transportation methods?
We don't. We've certainly seen some of that spike occur over the past 5 years. And so, yeah, and the client has certainly been a little bit wary and unsure of how that dynamic of these new regulatory laws, how that's going to continue to impact the size of the market and their sales.
Okay. Well, so if they're looking to make the company private, it probably just means that they want to bring more of the revenue that the company will produce to its inside partners instead of public shareholders, and they don't want to grow the company that way. So, they may actually be thinking that there might be a market growth because of these laws that could be overshadowed by the new entrances of Nike and Reebok into it. So we may want to understand in that equation if there's a balance that is net profit, or if it's, those two dynamics may actually net out into a loss for them.
Yep. We know that one way that the client would like to look at this is in terms of their customer segments.
Okay.
So The customer segments that HardHead sells to primarily include the adult cycling enthusiast segment, the casual biker segment, and the under 18 segment. So just on the face of things, how would you expect the purchase behavior to differ between these segments? And what do you think each segment wants in a helmet?
All right, perfect. Just give me a moment to think about that.
Okay.
Okay. So you mentioned there were three major customer segments, the adult cycling, casual biker, and then the under 18. I would guess maybe assuming that each segment is probably a third of the customer market. When we think about adult cycling, the priority for them may just be doing it for sport or for health. And they, I'm not sure if they may want to continue using a helmet. Maybe they do continue using a helmet because there's the sport element or the health priority there. From the casual biker perspective, so it sounds like they would be doing it more for a fun. And so maybe this is the segment that I may think may shift a little bit in priority, because if the goal was just fun, they may just want to identify other, areas or entertainment ideas. And then for the under 18, I think for this one is more around, they're smaller, more around security, also could be fun. But I would probably think they would stay constant because, parents would want to continue taking out their children, and children may want to keep using their bikes. So I'm guessing they may stay the same in terms of usage of their helmets.
Okay. So you talked a lot about the usage of helmets based on the regulatory requirements and the shift in the legal landscape and the security that helmets provide as well. When we think about these different customer segments, what are other ways in which they may, prefer, have differences in their preferences?
Well, we talked about, so some of them may really prioritize security, whereas all others won't. So for example, I would think the adult sport segment may really prioritize security versus, the casual biker, maybe not so much, and same for the under 18. So they, there could be some lack of, growth between those two segments. And your question was what other ways we can differentiate the three segments?
Yeah, and you've talked through some safety elements and the regulatory impact. What are other ways in which these different customer segments may have different preferences?
Okay. Well, there could be a monetary issue here as well. So, some of them may want more kind of like niche helmet that provides better protection, that is more fashionable, whereas others may just want the regular style. So there could be a change in demand in terms of how much each segment is willing to spend on the bikes. So maybe do we have information on which of these three helmets types cost and what's the demand for each of them?
No, we don't. But let's actually take a little bit of a closer look at these segments.
Okay.
How might we think about sizing each of these customer segments?
Sure. We could do kind of like a top to bottom approach or a bottoms up. Do you have any preference on how we go about it?
Yeah, I'm interested in hearing your thought process off the top of how you would think through this.
Sure. So assuming that, we don't have information on the geography of the company, but assuming that they're based in the US and their customer market is in the US, we know there's approximately 350 million individuals in the US who live here. And we might want to think about, how we can split that according to different states. So I would think that, let's say there's 20% of the population who have disabilities and essentially may not engage much in these activities. So we can take out 5% of the population who may not want to do or be able to do biking or be outdoors. We could also think about the different states and the geography. So in states where you have like more mountains or more outdoors, there may be larger demand for doing cycling. Although a lot of people still do it in the city, I think in the outdoors, there may be more. So we may want to segment that by, take out a percentage of states where there may not be that much activity. And then
I like the way you're thinking about it. Yeah, we have learned, we were able to learn fairly early on after the intro. We have learned that they operate in the U.S. And so, let's go ahead and start with our calculation. I understand that you were wanting to segment by geography. Let's go ahead and think about it in terms of households and calculating first for the under 18 segment. How might you think through those steps?
Sure. So let's say we have 350, maybe let's assume just 300 for the purpose of making it easier. 300 million individuals. And let's say that there are 5 individuals on average per household. So if we divide 300 over 5, we get 60. So that means there's 60 million households in the U.S.
Yeah, let's actually take 100 million households.
Okay, 100 million households. And then if we were to simplify in terms of the states that are outdoors rather than states that have more city population, from a geography standpoint, maybe we can say...
I understand going through a geography standpoint, but let's go from households and then think about kind of age segmentation to be able to think about the adult side of the segment and the children's side of the segment.
Okay, so if we have 100 million households and 5 individuals are on the household, I would say, 2 of them are probably adults and the rest are children. And so we can say that there's 3 children per household. And so let's take 2 adults per household. Yep. And then let's say that 50% of all households have 2 children and that the remainder have 0 children. Okay. So you said 50% of all households, which would be 50 million, have 2 children, correct? Mm-hmm. Okay. And let's assume all of these children are under 18 because otherwise they would be living in college or in somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And so if we have 2 children and we have 50 million households, then that means we probably have 100 million children under the age of 18. Mm-hmm. And so now we probably want to figure out who is actually engaging in using a bicycle versus who's not. And so, like I said, maybe we could take out a 5% who may have a disability and may not be able to go outside. We could also think about, people who are overweight and may not enjoy doing activities outdoors.
Yeah, let's take 75% of children under 18 ride bicycles.
Okay, 75% ride bikes. So that then means there's 75 million children in the United States who are riding a bicycle. And if they are riding a bicycle, some of them may already have helmets and they may not need to buy new helmets, but some others may need to replace them or get new helmets. So maybe we could say that half of them could would be buying helmets or new helmets?
Oh, yeah, we don't have any specific data about that right now, but it's good to state that the under 18 segment is 75 million. Now we need to size the cycling enthusiasts. That's 2% of the adult population.
So, 2% of the adults. Okay. And so we know already that we have 2 adults per household of the 100 million households, which would essentially be 200 million adults. And you said that the cycling enthusiast is 2% of the adult market. So 1% is 2 million and 2% is 4 million. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then in terms of the casual biker, do we have any information around what percentage of the market they could be?
Yeah, that's 20% of adults.
Okay, 20% of adults. So we know 2% was 4 million, so 20% is 40 million. Mm-hmm. Okay, so far that means we have 75 million of children. Then we have 4 million cycling enthusiasts and 40 million of the casual bikers. So altogether is 119 million of customers that we probably have for our helmets. But now we know that HardHead was a leader with 60% of market share. Mm-hmm. So if we assume, just looking at the amount of customers we may have, if we could consider that they have, well, it's a bit of a long shot, but we could take the 60% of the customers and then figure out from there, or we may want to calculate like the actual the amount of consumption of all of these individuals.
True. Yeah, those might be some good things to do moving forward. Yet at this point, just looking at the size of these segments, what do you think some of the implications are going to be for HardHead's future earnings?
Sure. Well, we said 75% is children, 4 million is cycling enthusiasts, and 40 are casual bikes. So it looks like the largest customer segment is for children under the age of 18. And in thinking about the fact that there's a law that would mandate wearing helmets, I would think that parents would want to comply with the law and want to continue providing helmets for their children, or buying for those who don't have. And so if this is the largest market segment, then this may mean there's a larger growth for these 75 million, because it represents the largest portion of customers for HardHead.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So Silvia, let's say that the partner from the PE firm just walked into the room and wants to know whether or not they should do the deal. What do you think?
Yeah. Well, I would first say, that we were brought in to figure out whether or not to take a company private. And my recommendation is that we do take the company private, given that we've recognized, based on the analysis we've done on customer segments, that the largest customer segment is for children under 18, and it's worth 75 million. And given there is a legal element of implementing new laws mandating bicycle helmets, we expect a growth in this particular segment based on the needs for the segment to continue to have security. And then some of the risks we may have is that parents may actually not want to buy helmets for their children and get upset about this law and actually find other means of entertaining children outside of cycling. So we may lose customers. But one way to mitigate that risk is actually engaging in a campaign to promote further security and leveraging schools to kind of like promote that message. And in terms of next steps, I think it'd be very helpful to get additional information on the company and analyze its financial performance to figure out if it's worth actually taking the company private.
All right. Break. Silvia, how did that feel?
Oh my God, terrible.
Why
Wow.
so?
Yes, I was expecting some sort of slides or something with some numbers, but clearly, that was not coming. So I should have saw that happening much earlier.
I mean, you can't be sure until you go through it or not, if that's going to be a part of the conversation. There was a little bit of a math component. I had you do a couple of calculations, right? But not extensively so. This was chewing on a business problem, like trying to get to what do we actually know, what do we not know, what could be relevant and important here. Okay, so let's take a few minutes. Let's debrief, and then we will get some Q&A from the folks online. So overall, we took 35 minutes on this case. I would expect us to be able to go through this case in 30 minutes or less, right? So we lost some time with kind of a lack of focus and clarity, not being super efficient of going from one topic to the other. We started off and the prompt was minuscule, right? I had like no information to give you off the top, but especially if I have very little information to give you, like, then I absolutely want you to hear that and apply that correctly. So, it's a leading manufacturer of bicycle helmets. Should they take this company private? So it wasn't the worst thing in the world. I had to kind of re-clarify later on that that's what the initial prompt was. But there up front, I had a very short background to share with you. And so it's an opportunity for a quick, short recap back to me, and then a couple of clarifying questions. So, I had made the decision beforehand that I wasn't going to give you any information up front. Now, that doesn't mean that once we start the project that we won't know where they operate or kind of what maybe some of the overall goals would be, etc. Those become things that if we don't know them now, they have to be areas to investigate moving forward. And so we should make sure that those individual things are captured in the structure and framework that you create in the next step. So, something like, wanting to understand the any other potential objectives around this, like specific goals, target metrics, their financial time horizon, stakeholder interest preference. I think those are things that you asked about, but didn't end up in the first version of the structure that you laid out in the next step. You only took, I counted about 68 seconds to be able to write out your structure. And so it really, even if I'm not timing it as an experienced interviewer, that would feel short to me. And it would feel like, gosh, there was an opportunity there to add a little bit more depth and robustness to this structure. And especially when we're talking about an interviewee-led case, the breadth and the depth of your structure is a huge component part and factor of your success going through the rest of the conversation. Because what it does is it provides you that roadmap to be able to march piece by piece through the individual component parts of what you wrote down on that structure. And that's too where I felt like we got tripped up just a little bit, because it was like you got like one piece of market data and information, and then it was, well, that wasn't necessarily all the information that I had to give for you in that category. But then you took the approach to kind of say, oh, well, we talked about the market. Oh, well, we talked about this other part. It's like, yeah, we got to one piece of data, but what might be other aspects there? Like, did you, have you gone through, did you actually go through and ask bullet point by bullet point, whether we had that information, whether or not we had any insights there, et cetera. And so that systematic approach of going through piece by piece and then actually kind of marking off or crossing off each of those components is going to be a really useful strategy and tact to take when you are going through an interviewee-led style case delivery. So, I appreciated in your delivery of the structure that it was a good time frame. It was about 2.5 minutes in total. The first sentence out of your mouth was telling me how many categories you had and what the titles of those were. I loved that. That's what I want to hear in your first sentence of your presentation. It gives me that mental roadmap to understand what the categories are that you're going to be talking through over the next couple of minutes. I want then you to continue to provide that structure and clarity to me as you talk through, being careful that you're going to tell me again, like you're going to walk through each category. You're going to tell me when you're moving to the next category. So when I first wrote down your categories, I wrote down financials as the title of the first category. And then as you started to talk through it, it was like maybe that was profitability, which is just a little bit of a sidestep, right? But maybe we're just going ahead and launching in there. It felt like a little bit of a disconnect. As you went through the content, I thought that what you had was good. You did a great job to, hey, as you were presenting through it, you thought of additional things. And by no means is it off limits to continue to add to your structure as you're talking through it. Oh, actually, that's made me think also I want to investigate X, Y, or Z, right? In terms of understanding the target company, understanding this business and its operations. From a content perspective, that's where I felt like there was the greatest opportunity for more content in that space in your structure. Whereas, you could have had something about really wanting to understand more about that product and service or the customers. You did have competitors in the market bucket. And so there was an opportunity to dive into that just based on your structure. But something about the product, wanting to better understand the helmet, the different types of helmets that we sell, the price point of that, right? And then wanting to understand how we view our customers, how are they geographically distributed, or what have we seen in growth in that? How does our customer think about segments? Those are all things that could have possibly ended up in your upfront structure. So then we have to take the approach to say, okay, this is an interviewee-led style case, so you got to lead me through the discussion. And that starts with the end of your presentation with your structure. I want you to finish your presentation of your structure by telling me what category you think is most important and where you want to start. And you got there. There was a little bit of a pause, I think, in getting there. And then we start to go through, okay, do we have this information? No, we don't have that information. Do we have this information? No. And then even when I started to give you some data and information, it was a few of my answers, there was still some ambiguity to it, right? So I started to feel like, okay, I'm going to offer some information. Maybe you didn't directly ask me for that, but yes, there have been some different dynamics going on in the market that have led to some growth. Key opportunity for follow-up question. Well, do we know any more about what some of those dynamics were? What has been going on in the marketplace? How much have we been growing, right? And I wouldn't have had the answer to all those questions, but we could have dove in deeper into and faster gotten to the aspect of helmet laws and some of the aspects around that. Moving through that, we got to the channels information. I felt fairly easily, but I started to feel like more and more that I was offering up some of the information. We weren't kind of hitting it directly with the questions asked, but we were getting to most of the pieces. The changes, and then I asked you a question on changes in distribution channel. I thought that you had some good insights and ideas there. One other idea that you could have come up with would be, right, if we've already been able to gain so much market share only through specialty stores, perhaps that tells me that the specialty retailers and the hands-on kind of experience that these sales associates likely have with their customers, they're probably pushing customers that come into the store to our brand, to our product. We're not going to have that dynamic going forward in a discount store. We're not going to have that sales associate expertise to be able to help drive customers to our product. So maybe we also want to reevaluate our branding and our marketing and the way that we're, kind of developing our product packaging material. Are there any other ways that we can think about, really trying to still drive customers even in a discount retail setting to our product? What do we know about our brand recognition? What do we know about our product recognition in the marketplace? There just may really be a different dynamic there, as well as being squeezed out on our profit margins because of, having to compete on price. or having to just be constricted into a certain contract with these retailers, et cetera, right? So I thought that there was just a couple ideas where we could have gone in that part of the conversation. Then we got to helmet laws, regulatory. What impact does this have? In the last 5 years, we've passed these helmet laws. And I did state and frame it at one point to say, we have seen some of that spike with the increase in revenue, increase in growth. So yes, we might expect to continue to see that. And yet there would be an expected dynamic where that would drop off to some degree, yet then the overall kind of growth and size of the market would probably be higher than it was before. But we don't really know at this point. Maybe we've already seen the majority of the significant increase in sales as helmets were purchased for the first time after these new helmet laws were put into place. And so I thought that was a dynamic that could have been mentioned and identified. Although I still think that you had some good ideas there. Then we went and looked into the customer segments, and we did a little bit of market sizing. Well, we identified what things might be interesting to the different customer segments. I tried to pull your answer up, right? Okay, you've told me some great ideas about the impact of regulatory and the safety features and the aspect of security that they might be interested in. What might some other preference areas be, right? So your first instinct was to dive in a little bit deeper into those areas again, which was okay because you hadn't talked to each of those areas in the full level of depth per customer segment. But I still wanted, okay, what are some other things? If we take those more at a categorical level, what might be some other categories that matter? You got to price, you got to kind of style, right? Fashion forward, the look and feel, even things like size of helmets, performance features. These would be some different elements and areas of preference difference that we would expect between the customer segments. And so those are some additional ideas and direction we could have gone there. And then in a little bit of market sizing, right? And if anybody's seen me and heard me led through market sizing estimates, exercises, then you know that my big thing is, hey, the interviewer is probably going to have all the data to give you, or they're going to have none of the data to give you. And so when I inserted into your equation that let's go ahead and take 100 million households, that should be a clear trigger and indicator to you that you should continue to ask for or confirm your estimates along the way, that I would continue to have that information and data to give you. And so you did the math. There was a little bit of a hiccup when you were trying to say, oh, if we have 100 million households, that means there's 5 people per household, 2 adults and 3 children. But I'm like, where did that come from? Like, there's not 500 million people. There was just a little bit of a disconnect there, I think, in the rationale and in the math. But then when we got the numbers out, you did the math correctly. I thought you had some good thoughts there. There were other conclusions that people could come to as well, right? So from what you've talked about, what you've been able to identify about the differences between these customer segments and then the size of these markets, what are those dynamics? What do you think the impact is that has on the client, right? And being able to really pull these pieces of information and disparate pieces of data together to be able to come to some sort of conclusion. The conclusion that you came to was, yes, maybe there's a really good opportunity here to take it private, continue to grow in this market space, continue to leverage and profit off of the regulatory environment of increased helmet laws. Somebody could have easily made the opposite recommendation as well. I recommend that we not take this private. Maybe we actually investigate divesting from this moving forward because of the new entrance of Nike and Reebok, because of the high percentage of under 18 customers and how customers moving forward may be directed towards different products in the discount realm. To further investigate that and proof point that out, I would want to investigate X, Y, and Z. Those would be my next steps, right? So there was enough information here where I think you could have made a reasonable conclusion either way. It's all about how do you support that? What's the rationale towards that conclusion? You added some risks and next steps. I thought those were good. And of course, there's so many more things you'd want to investigate and analyze because we only hit the tip of the iceberg today. But you kept it within the realm of what we talked about, and you had some good rationale there. And so I felt like at the end that came together pretty well.